So Democrats are trying to punch holes in the Constitution to cement power. A story old as time. If you lose, rewrite the rules. Because this is the Brink. Folks, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to The Brink. We're so happy to have you here. We look forward to talking to you every day. So remember back in 2016 when Donald Trump won and liberals couldn't believe that voters didn't want a woman who left 4 Americans to die in Benghazi to now control the entire shebang, so they called to abolish the Electoral College. And then remember how we really didn't hear much about that in 2020. And look, maybe it's because they knew that they had a slam dunk candidate who would get the most votes in history. Well, now that Biden is flailing in the polls and Trump is increasingly likely to beat him, they're back. So this is a scholar who is upset that a simple majority can't control a minority. Have a listen.
Well, we are the only presidential democracy in the world where the president can lose the election, lose the popular vote, and become president. We are one of the few democracies in the world where a major legislative body, the Senate, the party that loses the popular vote can control and routinely does control the Senate. We are the only established democracy in the world where justices have lifetime tenure. There's no term limits. There's no retirement age. So this set of institutions and others allows political minorities to systematically thwart and sometimes even govern over majorities. Very quickly, think back to 2016.
So the Electoral College requires more than just the raw votes to win. It requires a geographical balance that is meant to protect rural voters so that they are not disenfranchised. It is designed to prevent a situation in which a president wins just because of regional density. And the idea there is that a president has to have these, moderate and centrist policies rather than just catering to the coastal cities, which are heavily populated and, unfortunately, increasingly far left. In fact, James Madison warned in Federalist 10 of a pure democracy in which the public good is disregarded by parties and instead decided on the superior force of an interested and overbearing majority. So I am sure that we will see this kind of talk heat up in coming months as Democrats try to keep Trump out of office and off the ballot. And if that doesn't work, other Democrats are hoping the 14th Amendment will do the trick. So a Colorado judge is set to decide by Thanksgiving whether the 14th Amendment's ban on insurrectionists holding office disqualifies Trump. So the 14th Amendment was written, in part, to prevent any former Confederates who rebelled against the Union from holding office. Now, I'm not going to waste too much time explaining why Donald Trump is not the same as a Confederate, but in today's day and age, I guess we should cover some ground rules. Confederates, they had their own currency, their own officers, their own laws. I mean, they were operating under an entirely separate country. But the real question at the heart of this challenge is whether Donald Trump falls under the category of an officer of the United States. Because the 14th Amendment, it is clear about senators, representatives, military officers, but it is not clear about the presidency. So that is the question that I think has to be answered first. And we do have a partial answer. Chief Justice John Roberts, he issued the 2010 opinion in the case of Free Enterprise Fund versus Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, in which he said, "The people do not vote for officers of the United States. Rather, officers of the United States are appointed exclusively pursuant to Article 2, Section 2 procedures. It follows that the president, who is an elected official, is not an officer of the United States." So even if you were to argue that Donald Trump is an officer, there's no precedent, and this question is likely going to have to go right back to the Supreme Court. Then, of course, there is the question of, did Donald Trump incite an insurrection? Well, if questioning the results of an election amounts to an insurrection, then I guess Democrats finally got him. But let's be clear about something. I don't like the idea that if you question whether the United States government, the same government which has been known to meddle in elections worldwide, if they meddled in ours, that you can be charged with inciting a riot. That if you encourage verbatim peaceful protests and some people decide they don't want to listen, that you can be charged with inciting a riot. The founders risked treason charges, right? We're talking about life and death here. When they rebelled against the government, when they questioned the crown, it is the most American thing you can possibly do, question your government, especially a government corrupt as ours. And speaking of ways to keep Republicans down, the White House checked their handy little toolbox and found that media shills can still do the job of suppressing any interest into the impeachment inquiry into Biden. Talk about a separation of church and state, more like media and state. So after Speaker McCarthy announced the inquiry into Biden, the White House sent letters to news executives telling them to, quote, ramp up their scrutiny of House Republicans for opening an impeachment inquiry. And apparently this worked over at CNN because they released an entire fact-check report in which they admit the claims and allegations that Republicans have are valid, they have some facts to support it, but there are some unimportant buts there, right? I invoke James Madison once more. He said, public opinion sets bounds to every government. But how is public opinion created? Well, in part, it's through reading the news, right? Understanding what is going on. But when you have a media that works in cahoots with an administration rather than being unapologetically scrutinous of that administration, the public gets a warped view of what's going on, and subsequently, they have a warped public opinion, so they don't see the need to bound the government by some set of standards because to them, the government's done nothing wrong. And then the government can remain unfettered, right, in their ability to stifle dissent, to stifle opposition, and to create and hold the narrative. Now, of course, there is recourse for this, right? I mean, you can read the Daily Caller, you can subscribe to be a patriot, but nonetheless, this is something to keep in mind as you go forward and you ingest the news. Folks, more on the Brink tomorrow.